Hello there, cjhoyle here, and in this video I'd like to tell you about this ukulele here, which is a Maple Soprano ukulele that I built myself from scratch using wood that I got from my local hardware store. And when I set out to build this, I wanted to try and build something that would have an equivalent sound to this ukulele, my Kala KAKS ukulele, which at the time was my favorite ukulele, and I really liked how this one sounded. So I wanted to try and build this one to be the same as it as possible. So I tried to match, all the dimensions so it would be really similar. And overall, I've been really happy with how this one turned out. And now, of course, this one's my favorite ukulele. So let's just give you a little sample of it. And I've already posted a few videos on my other YouTube channel of this ukulele in action. But in this video I'd like to tell you a little bit about how exactly I built it. So unfortunately I didn't take any video while I was building this thing because it took me many hours, and I figured if I had to figure out getting a camera angle for every little shot that I did, I knew it would just take way longer. And of course I was still kind of experimenting a little bit because I'd never built anything anywhere near the complexity of a ukulele. But while I was building it I took a whole bunch of photos. So I'd like to take you through a little slideshow of some of the photos that I took while I was building this, and to kind of describe exactly what it was that I did to build this ukulele. So the photo album that I'm going to be showing you here is actually available right on my website. If you go to cjhoyle.com, then you just click on the music button here, and then there's a ukulele button down here, which will allow you to go through and look at all the photos if you want to take a look at any of them in more detail. I've also created a caption for every photo that's below there down here, so you can read a little bit more about it, and you can also just flip through all the photos and read the captions. But I'm going to take you through one by one and just tell the story about how I built this ukulele. Alright, so starting from the very beginning, this is me bringing home the very first piece of wood that I used for starting to build my ukulele. My ukulele is built almost entirely out of hard maple, which I chose kind of because I wanted, because hard maple grows native to Canada, and I kind of wanted to make my ukulele kind of a, a Canada-themed uke in a way. And hard maple is also a great wood for that kind of thing because it's also, really strong and durable, and really hard, of course. So I figured it would be a good choice for a musical instrument, so that it would be, nice and durable over time. This first piece that I bought was mostly what I used for building the neck. It measures 4 feet long, 3/4 of an inch thick, and 2.5 inches wide. A few weeks later I bought another piece, a much wider piece, the same dimensions as this one, except it was 7.5 inches wide instead of 2.5. And that was the piece that I used for resawing, to take the little narrow pieces that I used for building the body of the ukulele. And I'll get more into that as, of course, we get to there. So the next slide is me picking up my next really major purchase, which was buying a bandsaw, which at first I thought maybe I'd get away with, using mostly hand tools for building this, but in the end I decided, well, a bandsaw is at least a small bandsaw would be pretty useful for this. So I just used my bike trailer. This was on sale. It's only a 9-inch bandsaw. It's a pretty small one, and I got it on sale for only $119.99 at Canadian Tire. So this is me getting started for building the neck. So basically I just took that first piece of wood that we saw there on the back of my bike, and I just cut it into smaller pieces. You can see the width of these is still the original width that when I got it from the hardware store. These pieces here I've cut down to size a little bit to be able to fit those on. This part here is what is joined together with what's called a scarf joint. So I forget what the angle was, but I think it was about 15 degrees. I cut this piece of wood and glued it onto there. And then of course I cut this part up here off afterwards, and I think we'll see that in the next slide here. So I decided, rather than cutting this before I glued it, I figured it would be easier to glue it on if I just cut one of the joints and then I cut the other one afterwards. And I decided that a handsaw would probably be the best way of getting a nice straight clean cut, or as close to that as I could. So I just glued, or I just clamp these little other strips of maple on there to kind of help guide my handsaw for cutting that piece off to get that angle. And there it is after I cut it. So it's not a perfectly clean cut, but it's pretty close. And as it turns out, it doesn't really need to be that clean because I cut this narrow veneer, which is going to get glued on top of there and kind of cover up this joint here, as well as cover up my not so clean cut. I just cut this veneer using the bandsaw, just cutting a slice off of one of the sides of it. So I just glued that on there, and that's me clamping it down. Now, this is at the very beginning of the project when I didn't have that many clamps. You can see I only have these these three C clamps, these metal clamps here. I had these little, these plastic clamps, which are not the strongest clamps, but I also use my vice grips here as clamps as well, because I really wanted to get a lot of pressure on here to make sure there wouldn't be any kind of a gap, going around on any of the edges. And as I got further into the project, I did, invest in a lot more tools, including lots more clamps as well. So that's what it looked like after I had glued it together. So it ended up, being a pretty good glue joint with, again, not a whole lot of gaps going around it. So next I was getting ready to start shaping the neck. So I made these little paper templates that I glued on the side to kind of mark where I needed to cut. So I needed to cut this little part here off of, this part here is called the heel of the neck. So I just used these paper templates to give me something to follow when I was cutting on the bandsaw. And I clamped another piece of maple on here to be able to keep this part upright, because back over here there's nothing to support these, because just like on the top here, these aren't the full width of the neck. So this helped me keep it upright when I was cutting it. And there it is after it got cut off. So a nice clean cut off of that. And again, I took all the dimensions that I'm creating here on paper are things that I just measured directly off of my Kala KAKS ukulele, because again, I wanted to try and make them as similar as possible, at least in the areas where it mattered. So there's again another shot of what it looked like, and here you can see I've glued another paper template on here, which is what I used to help get the taper of the neck. So I cut along this line here. This center line here is just helping me getting it centered on the piece of wood. But again, I just cut along these two outside lines for getting it off, for shaping the neck to the right width. And there's one of the two sides cut off, and again, I used my bandsaw to make that cut, just following the line as carefully as I could. And there's what it looked like after I cut it down. So it's just again comparing the two ukuleles of this is what I'm trying to get to, and this is what I've done so far. So basically now I've just got to do some detail on the headstock up here, as well as just to shape, of course, the bottom as well. Again, there's a side profile of kind of how they compare. So far I'm doing pretty well with the dimensions. And now I'm getting ready to cut that headstock design. Now, one of the parts of the ukulele of the KAKS that I didn't copy was the design of the headstock here. You can see I've got my own little fancy design up here with these little ears on either side. This was something that this is something that guitar makers and ukulele makers and instrument makers, they like to make their own unique headstock design. They like to have their own kind of design up here, and I was no different. I wanted to do something of my own. I wanted to have my CJH logo up here at the top, and I kind of wanted this top surface here to be flat, but having a completely flat headstock at the top would be pretty boring. So I added these rounded kind of ear things at the top to try and make it a little bit more interesting. So that's why I did it that way, and again, I think it looks pretty cool in the end. So that's the headstock design I was going for. So I just glued these paper templates on there to be able to follow along. Now the back of this, this is where the scarf joint is. So this part here is actually at a different angle here. So with the paper template, I actually had to project this one at a different angle so that I would be able to get this piece to be continuous, so it would match what was on the back. Because if I just taken this template and glued it over here, then this would not be the exact right shape of what I had intended. So that's why these two pieces of paper are separated. And I had to glue this onto the back because I wanted this I wanted part of this to ride flat on the table of the bandsaw. So of course with this angle here, I had to run it upside down, because I couldn't have put this part flat because this isn't at an angle here. So there's what it looked like after I cut it out, and again, it was really easy just following along with the paper template. So now I'm getting ready to cut the taper on the side. So, the back of the ukulele, the neck is going to be all very nicely rounded. And I do that mostly with hand tools. But to get me started for making those cuts, to remove a bulk of the material, I ran the ukulele neck through the bandsaw with the table tilted to be able to just remove a lot of the material to get started. So I just again tilted it. I use this block of wood here to keep it from this neck going too far down and the bandsaw taking too much off. So there's what it looked like after I took off one of those slices, and then I just ran it through in the other direction and did the same on the other side. And then from here it was all working with hand tools that I used to get it all nicely rounded and shaped. I used the spoke shave kind of as my main tool of removing lots of material, as well as a pocket knife, which I used in the parts that I couldn't really get to with my spoke shave, and of course lots of sandpaper at the end to get it nicely rounded. You can see here it's really taking shape. I'll just use a clamp to hold it to the work table here. Here you see I'm clamping it at the front, and here I'm clamping it at the bottom. So I just kept switching it back and forth so I could get the whole thing really nicely shaped. And there's what it looked like after a night of working away with hand tools and getting it all really nice, and getting it really nice and shaped. And this was after I had sanded a little bit as well. And again, you can see it's quite similar to the one that I was trying to replicate up here. So now that I had the neck essentially completed, I moved on to working on the body. Now the body is kind of a complicated thing. Basically the outside edge that goes around a body is a piece of wood that's been bent, and they usually use steam or heat to bend the ukulele, the sides of the ukulele to fit around it. So what I'm creating here is a bending form, which I'm going to use for bending my wood around. And I made this template just by tracing and figuring out the shape of my Kala KAKS ukulele, and I made it into a paper template. And in here I printed it and I stuck it onto this piece of cedar. This is an old cedar fence post, which is what I used for bending the sides of my ukulele. So I just glued that on there, and then with my bandsaw I just cut that profile out. And then I did that again with another piece of cedar so I can make two equal halves of the ukulele. And with my offcuts, I actually saved them, and I put this little piece of wood on here to reinforce them, because of course they're very thin in these little sections here. And then with that, I was able to make these outer bending forms, so I could put my bent piece of wood inside here, and then I could just press these outer, shell things on the outside of them, so I could pretty much clamp my piece of wood in the shape that I wanted it to be in. So there I am, just showing you what the bending form looks like with my Kala KAKS ukulele, so you can see that the shape is pretty much identical to what I was trying to get it to. So here I am cutting that strip of wood, which is what I'm going to use to bend and put in that bending form there. So I used my bandsaw, I just put the resaw fence up here and just cut a sliver off there. And then I worked, I ran it through a few more times to get it to be the right thickness that I wanted. Now, of course, that bandsaw doesn't do the greatest job of resawing. You can see that the cut here doesn't have a very clean surface, but that was no problem. I was able to, get it pretty clean just using an aggressive piece of sandpaper and my hand sander and just running it back and forth along here. And the desired thickness of this piece of wood was 2 millimeters, so I got it very close to that at various different sections along there. And there's the piece, again, just showing you what it looked like after I'd finished sanding it. So now this outside edge here is actually, the outside edge of the original board that I bought from the hardware store. So this part here this part didn't need to be sanded because it was already really, really smooth. And the inside edge, again, I worked to try and get it as smooth as possible, but it's actually, on the inside of the ukulele, so you never really see it. So it doesn't need to be, extremely perfect. So there is my piece of wood with the bending form, just getting ready to bend. Now, before actually bending it, of course, that if I were just to take this piece of wood and try and bend it around here without doing anything, it would certainly crack. So what I did is I made a device for steaming my wood, something that I could put on the stove. So I made an adapter which could attach a steam pipe to the top of a kitchen pot. So I made that out of pieces of plywood. I cut them out to various different shapes. Now, of course, my bandsaw isn't huge and I don't have a scroll saw, so I wouldn't be able to cut an inside hole like that. So I just made everything in 2 halves, and then I just connected them together with screws. So there's the outside edge, which goes around the outside of the pot, and then it fits on top of the pot like that. With this piece, which actually you can't see it, it's not in the picture, it's not attached, but this middle piece here goes inside there, and then there's just a small groove around this outside edge here, which fits inside of the pot, like so. And then on top of there, well, you fill the pot, of course, with water, and you boil it on the stove, and then this piece of plastic piping, it's made of ABS, is actually a drain pipe that I got from the hardware store. It goes on top of there, and I've got these screws which just hold it from falling inside of the pot, and then you boil water, and this whole chamber fills up with steam, and there's a little plastic container lid that goes up here and covers the top of it and keeps most of the steam inside there. And then you put your long piece of wood in there, and then you get it nice and hot and moist, and then when you take it out, it's very flexible, and you're able to bend it around the curves. And I got this idea entirely from another guy that's built a ukulele. He's got a website, woodgears.ca, Matthias Wandel, and I pretty much took this exact idea directly from him, and it worked really, really well. He insulated his pot using paper towels. I decided to use some old socks. I just cut the end out, and the socks fit perfectly around this 3-inch piece of ABS piping. So after I left it in there after I left my piece of wood in there for a long amount of time, what I did was I put it in here, and I just had this. You see, there's a piece of string there. I had a clothes peg on there, which held it so that the wood wouldn't fall down and actually touch the bottom of the pot. It just kind of kept it suspended inside of there. So it was getting lots of steam, and then about halfway through, I think I kept it in there for like half an hour to get it really nice and warm and steamy. But about halfway through, I took the piece of wood out and I flipped it around so that both ends were getting down here and getting really hot, so that one end wouldn't be more flexible than the other. So after I took it out, then I put it on here, and I used a clamp to hold it in place here at one of the ends, and then I just pushed the 2 outer sides around there, and then I pulled them together using a ratchet strap, and that again pulled these 2 outer sides together to force this this narrow strip of wood into the right shape that it was supposed to be in. Now, something that Matthias on his website and on his videos he concluded was, after you had steamed something and you put it in the form here, after you remove your forms, what tends to happen is that there's some spring back, I guess, so that this thing doesn't exactly always keep the exact shape that it's on here. Once you take the forms out, you'd see that the sides of the ukulele would come apart, and it wouldn't really have the exact curvature that you wanted. However, he speculated that after he had finished, he said, well, what probably would have been better is if he had just built it like this, and then after steaming it, he could have just put his bending form as well as the body like inside of a warm oven, and then that would be able to relieve some of those stresses. And then once you had let it cool down after being in the oven, then it should hold the exact shape of there with very little spring back. So I decided to try that idea. And that's why I made my bending form without any glue or clamps. I just made it out of these pieces of wood with screws holding it all together, so that my bending form could go right into the oven. Now, unfortunately, my ratchet strap would not have done very well in the oven. So what I did was I took some pieces of wood and I put them across the top so that I'd be able to remove my ratchet strap, so I could put it in the oven without my ratchet strap melting. So here you can see I've used these pieces of wood to screw it down and hold all the different parts of the mold or the form together while it's in the oven. So I did that. I put it in the oven for quite a long time, almost a full hour. I thought, when I was doing it, I was thinking, oh, the longer the better. I don't want to take this form apart and find that there's a lot of spring back. I wanted to do my best to relieve all that. But then after I had taken it out, I thought, oh dear, I hope I didn't leave it in too long and dry the wood out too much. But it ended up being totally fine and worked out really well. So there's what it looked like after I took it out of the bending form. I actually left it in for almost an entire week after I'd taken it out of the oven. I was worried about the moisture level, and I thought I would let it kind of get stabilized with the moisture in the air.
over that time, but I don't know whether really if that was necessary or not. After I took it out, it worked. Again, it really held the shape really well. And as you can see, here's my two ukuleles side by side, and this shape is very similar to the one here. So now I'm getting ready. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to glue together. I'm going to connect my neck with my body. But before that, I wanted to drill the holes for the tuning machines up here, because I figured it'd be easy to do that, while this was just a neck and didn't have a body connected to that. So I glued my paper template on there again to make sure that I get the holes in the right spots, and I center punched them, and then I started drilling my holes, and I started with a small hole, and then I enlarged it with a larger drill size. I did these three ones at the same time because the clamp was kind of covering up access to this hole here. But after I finished, I drilled the fourth hole here, and now you can see with all my tuners installed there. I just test fitted them on there. Of course, I took them back out again because I'm not going to need the tuning machines until closer to the end of the project. So now the type of connection that I used to connect my neck to the body is what's called a Spanish heel. And what it does is you cut a groove into the neck back here, and you have the neck is a little bit longer. It goes further back this way. Another option is to cut a mortise back here and have a mortise and tendon connection of the neck to the body. But I thought this was probably the easier way to do it. So you basically just glue the body, the two sides of the body directly into these grooves. So here I'm just getting ready to cut that groove on my bandsaw. And there you can see after I glued it together. So these two outer sides just get stuck right into that groove that I had there. And then you just glue it in there, and I've got these little wedges which just basically kind of use as clamps to be holding this, pushing this side up against the neck there, so it'll get a nice good glue joint. And again, there's a shot from the top. Now you can see it doesn't look the greatest here. This groove goes a little bit deeper than it needs to go, but in the end that didn't matter because I covered over this with the back piece that went over top. Also notice that these sides, they overhang, they stick quite a bit higher up here. That's again because I wanted to trim these afterwards to make sure that this surface here would eventually be flush with that. So it doesn't look great now, but by the end of the project it looked just fine. So there's what it looked like after they were glued together from another angle. And here I am trimming that overhang, so you can see, as I mentioned before, this part here at the back overhangs by quite a bit. This side here I had already trimmed, and the way that I did that was I just put a piece of tape along here and drew a line that I needed to follow, and then I used my Dremel tool with a sanding wheel or sanding drum along here, and I just sanded along that line and got it as straight as I could. And then afterwards I sanded the whole body at the same time on the same piece of sandpaper to get it really nice and flat. There's my line that I was talking about that I used to follow. This piece here is called the tail block. It gets glued at the bottom of the back down here. Now a lot of people when they build a ukulele, or a lot of companies when they build a ukulele, they'll build these two sides as separate pieces. So there'll be a joint here of this side here, joining up with this side here along here, and the tail block is kind of there to give you more surface area to glue those two pieces together. My ukulele, I just used that one long strip that I used. It's a continuous strip that's used for both sides. I figured since my steamer was long enough to accommodate a piece of wood that was that long, I figured it was probably easier just to do them together. But I still thought it was a good idea to still put a tail block there in case this ukulele someone ever wanted to put a strap onto there. You'd have to have one of the strap lock things connected to here, so you'd need something to hold on to down there. So now what I'm getting ready to cut are something what's called the kerfing, which are the little pieces which get wrapped around the edges, and it's for helping to get a better glue joint between the sides in the front and the sides in the back. So these are just actually this is one of the few pieces of wood that got glued onto the ukulele which wasn't made out of maple. This is made out of a spruce, so it's from a piece of a 2x4 or some kind of construction lumber. So I cut it into these little strips like this, just using my bandsaw. And the neat thing about kerfing is that you cut these little grooves into there, which allows it to be flexible, so it can be bent around. Now this is my first time making kerfing. You can see that all of it didn't turn out perfectly, but with all the pieces that I cut, there were more than enough usable, good pieces of kerfing that I could use for getting kerfing all the way around my ukulele body. So those pieces get glued around this outer edge around here, and that, as I said, it gives you something. It gives you a larger surface area for having the front and the back getting glued to the sides. And I used clothes pegs. I just bought these from the dollar store. It was the recommended way of clamping all the kerfing on, and to make the clamp a little bit stronger. Again, someone recommended using elastic bands. You put the elastic band around the clothes peg, it gives it a little bit more clamping power. And I actually used, rather than buying elastic bands, I just used pieces of old inner tube. I just cut them into homemade elastic bands for doing that. There you can see an up-close view of the kerfing. So I'm just using these clothes pegs to just hold the kerfing in place as the glue dries. And there's what it looked like after I removed it. So as you can see, I mean, these are not perfect, but these are kind of, I mean, you can see that these are not all uniformly cut with the same spacing like you'd see on a professional ukulele, but this is pretty much hidden most of the time, so it doesn't matter, and it serves the purpose of getting you your good glue joint. There's again a shot from the back. Now what I'm getting ready to make are the braces, the pieces which get glued up against the front and the back pieces, which are going to be there for reinforcing it. So I measured out these are the pieces that go, the ribs, I guess you'd call them, the pieces which go across the body like this. So again, I took as many measurements as I could from the ukulele that I was trying to replicate. I measured, try to get these to be, as close to the same as those ones as possible, and try to get the locations of them the same as possible, because the ribs actually supposedly have quite a large effect on the sound that comes out of the ukulele. So these got tapered as well. So this is me just laying it all out, getting ready to make my cuts. So this is after the ribs are ready. Now these have to the ribs are actually supposed to extend all the way from the sides, so beyond the kerfing. So the kerfing kind of gets in the way. So what people will do when they're building a ukulele is they'll leave little gaps in the kerfing for where the ribs or the braces are going to go. I decided to just make my kerfing continuous, and then afterwards to notch out in the areas where my braces need to go. So I did that with my Dremel tool again. So here I'm just laying these on in the right locations where they're supposed to go, and then I'm going to use my Dremel to notch them out. So you can see I've already notched this one out here, so you can see that it's sitting inside of that notch there for this one piece, and then I'm going to do the same for this one down here where I've marked it as well. And there I've got all of the bracing, all the holes in the kerfing cut for the back pieces there. Alright, so now this is me getting ready to make the panels that are going to go on the front and back, and you can see these are not the greatest looking pieces of wood here. So my bandsaw is only a 9-inch bandsaw, and the depth of cut is only about I think a little bit more than 3 inches tall, which is way too small for cutting the wide panels that are needed for a ukulele. So I took my piece of wood with me to Whitby, where my parents live, and my dad has a table saw in the basement. So I used his table saw for cutting the strips of wood down that I was going to use for the front and back. Now, unfortunately, the blade at the time that we had on the table saw was really dull, and it ended up burning the wood quite badly. And I also couldn't cut. Of course, the table saw is not an enormous table saw, so I couldn't cut all the way through the wood in one pass or anything like that. So I cut from both sides, and I left this little strip in the middle, and then I used a handsaw to cut it down to get the two halves, and then I just used a power sander to sand off, of course, all of the burnt wood, as well as sand down this little lip that's there in the middle. And in the end, I got a really good surface. So certainly not certainly not the best setup for cutting thin strips of wood. This table saw wasn't the best, but it ended up working fine, and for the amount of this I had to do, this was adequate. So So there's what it looked like after I had sanded it, and I'm just gluing together the two pieces of the panel. Gluing together these very narrow pieces of wood is pretty hard. If you put a clamp on either end, of course, it's going to bend in the middle, and it's not going to work that well. So I use what I've seen on one of the websites recommending just using a strip of tape along here to hold things together, and then pieces of tape across to hold it in place as the glue dried, and it worked just fine. Here's the piece of wood that I used for the front here. I guess that's the same piece of wood that I was showing here as well. Here I am, so drawing out where I'm going to need to cut around here, as well as drawing out where the hole in the middle is going to go. So there's the front and the back side by side. Now for the front, I used book matched pieces of wood. So basically this strip of wood comes, it's from the same, this piece of wood is from the same piece as this one here. This was cut from one side of the wood, this is cut from the other side of the wood. So you can see that the grain pattern is kind of a mirror image of itself. It's not exactly the same because it's not from exactly, this piece of veneer was not right beside this one. So they're not, they're not identical, but they're pretty similar, and it gives, a nice appearance for the front. For the back, I didn't really have pieces that were, perfectly book matched, so I just took the best two pieces that I had, even though they're not perfect. And it's the back of the ukulele, which you don't really see anyways. So there's showing what it'll look like with the braces glued on the outside there like that. Before gluing on the braces, I decided to cut my center hole here. Now I think a lot of people would use a scroll saw for cutting something like that. I don't have a scroll saw. And I don't have a coping saw either, although I don't think a coping saw really would have been the best either. So what I ended up using was my Dremel tool, and I used that, again, the same sanding disc, or the same sanding drum that I used for leveling out the back panel, or the side panels. I just used that and just went around the circle and just tried to get as close to this line as I could. So first I just drilled a hole in there, and then I used my Dremel tool inside there and just slowly enlarging this hole and tried to follow my pencil line as best I could. So there's what it looked like at the start. Not quite round, but again, as I got closer to the line, I got more and more careful and just took smaller and smaller amounts off. And in the end, I was really happy with how round I got my hole. It looks like it was drilled with a proper drill bit that was this size. It looks, in my opinion, it looks quite round. Although of course it's just a cosmetic thing. It really doesn't have any effect on the actual sound. So that's what it looked like. Then I cut. I didn't cut right up to the line of the body, but I just cut to the approximate shape of it, and that would just help me get the clamps in a little bit better when I was clamping the front onto the sides. And also for gluing on the braces, the ribs onto the inside of here. So here I am. The way I did this was I glued one rib at a time. I didn't want to do them all at the same time because I don't have that many clamps. So I actually used some clamps to hold the front panel here. I just clamped it to this piece of wood just to make sure when I was clamping over here that this whole thing was gonna stay straight, so it would be nice and flat all the time. So I just used this. This is a piece of MDF that I just cut to approximately the right shape here, just to help me get my clamps in there. I also made a little label which went on the inside of the ukulele. Again, this was my project, so I wanted to put my name on it, and I titled my ukulele Maple Soprano because it's a soprano-sized ukulele. It says handcrafted in Canada. It's got my signature, and there's my logo, my CJH logo, the same one that I put on the headstock. And of course I've got some Canada flags because it was made in Canada, and some little ukulele bodies as well, just to make my label a little bit more fancy. So I just glued that inside there between the ribs before I assembled the body. And now here I am, moment of truth, something that I've been putting off for weeks and weeks. I don't know about weeks and weeks, but this was something I was really dreading doing. I didn't want to glue my back on and find that it didn't work out. If something didn't work, you only really got one shot at this. If it got screwed up, I might have had to start, right from the beginning again. So I was really nervous to do this. But here I am getting everything ready to do it. And there I applied my glue to the back surface there. And there I've got all my clamps on, so I wanted to get lots of clamps on to make sure that I'd have a really good glue joint all the way along. You didn't want to have any gaps around the outside, so I've got clamps almost all the way around. I also spent a lot of time before gluing on to make sure that I got all of the edges there, really flat, so that it would, when you clamped it on, it would stay. It would eliminate any gaps around the outside, or as many gaps as possible. So there I am, gluing it in place with my clamps, every clamp that I owned at the time. And after I glued the back on, a few days later, after I waited for that glue to get really nice and hard, I did the same with the front there, and there it is after I removed all the clamps. And of course you can see the body still overhangs quite a bit. That was done on purpose because I wanted to, you want to leave a overhang a little bit, and then you want to make sure that you can trim this edge so it's perfectly flush with your sides down there. So now I'm getting ready to trim those sides. So what I used to remove the bulk of the material again was my sanding wheel, or my sanding disc, or sanding drum on my Dremel tool. And I didn't want the drum to slip off of the edge here and then nick the side, so I used first a piece of painter's tape, and then I used a piece of duct tape to just give you a durable skin around there, just to protect it so it wouldn't get damaged. So there, here I've got pretty close to the line. Again, I haven't gone all the way with my Dremel tool. I did the very last bit of the sanding with I think I used my power sander to get it right to the edge there. And there's what it looks like after I've got it right to the side. Yeah, I'm sure I used my my power sander to get that to the edge there. You can see that this edge here, it's still kind of a sharp corner. I haven't rounded this over. That was something that I did later with a hand piece of sandpaper. So really starting to look like a ukulele now. I think these pictures were taken in either February or early March. So I've been working on this since December. So this is quite a long project. A lot of the time was spent. Well, I mean, it took many hours to build this, but in between each step, I was very careful, and I spent a lot of days just thinking and planning out exactly what I wanted to do, because I didn't want to do anything that was going to ruin my project and make me have to start over. So I was a lot of thought went into how I built this, so it took a long time. There again are my two ukuleles side by side, looking at how I'm doing so far in terms of getting these to be the same. Now, of course, this looks very different because it's a different kind of wood, but the dimensions and everything are very similar to what I was going for there. So now what I'm getting ready to make is the bridge piece of wood that's at the bottom of the strings, where the strings get connected to the body, and where the piece of plastic goes at the bottom that the strings sit on and keep them above the surface of the wood. So it's got a few grooves in it in this orientation. So what I did was I took a scrap of that cedar that I used for the sides, and I cut a little groove in there which could fit this piece of wood, and my bandsaw was just tall enough to be able to cut upright on here and to be able to cut those grooves. And this piece of wood just was a way of me holding it upright in here, so I'd be able to cut that without, of course, getting my fingers close to there, as well as just to keep it really nice and upright for making that cut. So there's what it looked like after I had taken a few of the slices out there. I didn't get quite the exact, it took a few more cuts after that one there, and there's what it looked like pretty close to the end. And then the other thing that the bridge has is it has some material removed here on the sides. So there I am cutting my first groove in here, and then I cut from the sides in this direction here. And there's what it looks like afterwards. So that's showing again what I'm going for and what I've actually built. And there it is, sitting on top of the ukulele. So now what I'm getting ready to make is the piece that goes on here. It's called the fretboard, the piece where all of the metal frets get inserted inside of that wood there. So it's actually a separate piece of wood which gets glued on top of here. So here I am very carefully measuring where all of my frets are going to get inserted. So where I'm going to cut the grooves for the frets. And getting the spacing right on these is extremely important because that is what dictates the intonation, how in tune each note is going to be with respect to the rest of the ukulele. So very important to get these spaced out correctly. And as you can see, they're not evenly spaced. It's I think a logarithmic kind of a pattern, or a exponential kind of relationship that happens as you go further up the neck. So I use this block of wood here. I use it as a guide for drawing my lines and keeping everyone perpendicular, as well as when I actually used my saw, I ran it up along beside this. And this was something that I made in Whitby on the table saw, just by taking out slivers of this wood until it was the exact same thickness as the fretboard that I used here. So there I am, getting ready to cut my my first fret slot here. Now I looked around trying to get so the frets I bought from online through eBay. I think they were like $5 to buy a set of frets for a ukulele, so really not expensive. There's a fret sitting there. You can't really see it, but it's just a very thin piece of metal with a little piece which slides into a groove in the wood. Now it's really important that the slot that you cut inside of your fretboard is the exact right thickness, or it's within the right range of thicknesses that your fret is going to snugly fit inside there, without it being too hard to force it inside there and possibly splitting open your fretboard, as well as you don't want that cut to be too wide and then potentially having your fret moving around or eventually falling out. So I looked around quite a bit trying to find a saw that had the right kerf, or the right blade thickness, to be able to cut the right slot. And unfortunately at my local hardware stores there really wasn't anything that was really suitable for that. So I ended up having to buy this special saw from the specialty tool store, Lee Valley Tool. This saw here is actually called a fret saw. It's actually made for cutting the slots for inserting frets on musical instruments. So it was the exact right blade thickness. It was pretty expensive, but overall, I was really pleased with how well it worked. So I guess it was worth it. So there's that first slot cut there, you can see. So it's just a very narrow slot cut in the wood. And there I've cut all of the frets now, or all of the fret slots. Now before inserting in the frets, I wanted to put the fret marker dots in, and those are something that's just there to help you when you're playing the instrument to be able to see how far up the neck you are, just kind of a reference surface. So the way I did these is I drilled holes where I wanted them, and then I used a combination of epoxy and spray paint as just something that I inserted in there, and that's what I used as my fret dot. So it kind of makes like a plasticky kind of a material that it conforms to whatever shape you want it to conform, and then I use that as my fret dots. So here I am over here getting ready with my epoxy and some of my green spray paint. So I just mix that all together, the two parts of the epoxy as well as the spray paint, and then I just use my my toothpick to just smear it on top of here. Now I masked off the fretboard quite a bit to make sure that I wouldn't get any of this glue inside any of those slots that I cut, because that would ruin my slots and I wouldn't be able to get my frets in there. But I put lots and lots on here, which I realized afterwards was way more than I needed, and it actually was kind of a pain because I had to sand all of that off afterwards. But the idea was I wanted to get lots on there so that the bubbles that formed inside there would rise to the surface, and then the part that's up here doesn't matter because I'm going to sand all of that off. So here I am going over it with lots of sandpaper to wear it down, to get it down to just the parts that are on the outside here. And you can see as I sanded, of course I sanded away lots of the masking tape that was on there as well. But after I got all of that stuff removed, there you can see my fret dots along there, and I think they look pretty good overall. And they're perfectly flush with the top here, so you really can't even feel that they're there. They're very inobtrusive when you're playing. So there's what it looks like sitting on top of the ukulele. Now you'll notice that this has not been glued on yet, but you also notice that this fretboard still has a uniform width, even though the neck is tapered, and that's because I wanted to keep it so it was uniform, so I could use that piece of wood that I had on here to be able to cut them, cut all these frets, exactly perpendicular. So I wanted to had to all be the same width. But after I got to this point, now I could go in and taper the neck. So after I set the fretboard sitting on top of the neck, then I just traced along the taper there and got how much material had to be removed. And I did that on the bandsaw. Now something else that I had to do was, because the neck set a little bit higher than the body, I needed to glue an extra piece of wood on the bottom here, so that there wouldn't be a gap between the bottom of the fretboard and the body, the front panel, I guess. So I glued this little scrap of maple down there. Now I'm getting ready to cut. So these fret marker dots get put on the front of the fretboard, but a lot of ukuleles, a lot of musical instruments also will have fret dots along the side along here, which allows you, when you're playing it and you have your instrument sitting in front, projecting the sound forward, you're probably not going to be able to see these very well. So we put a second set of fret dots along the edge of the fretboard along here. So now I just drilling the holes for those, and the process of getting the fret dots, getting these fret dots was the same as this one here. So I just did that using the epoxy mixture, and this time I didn't put a huge amount over top. I just left a little bit on there to make it easier for removing all of that extra material at the end. So there's my tapered neck with my fret dots all there and my frets, and I'm just getting ready to start inserting them into the fretboard. Now, what I had seen recommended for inserting frets into fretboards was using a plastic mallet or a soft face mallet. I went to a lot of different hardware stores and I couldn't find them for sale. I probably could have bought one from Lee Valley, but it would have been probably really expensive. So what I ended up doing was I just took this old hammer that I had that actually got it's a claw hammer, and it's got the claws are actually broken off, so it's kind of it's still a useful hammer, but I had extra hammers anyway, so I just got this and I glued this block of plastic onto the front of it, and then I used that as my soft face hammer, and it worked really well. So there's my first fret inserted inside of the fretboard there, and it worked just fine. I just hammered it down and got it really got it hammered down there into the hole, and it worked into the slot, and it worked really well. You can see it overhangs at the edges. Afterwards I went through and I trimmed all of them. So there's a few more frets getting inserted in there. Again, it worked out really, really well. And there's here me getting ready to put the very last fret in. So kind of the way I did it was I just started to kind of guide it from one end there, and then I just kind of worked it in and just kind of hammered along here and got it all the way in. And then once it was in, I hammered it lots more to make sure it was really nice and far inside. So there it is with all the frets installed, just kind of sitting on top, just to kind of see how it looks. So after that, in between these two photos, I went through and I clipped off all of the edges there. I used, I think, a pair of side cutters to clip off the ends, and then I just sanded them smooth with the edge and just kind of rounded them over. So now I'm getting ready to glue on the fretboard. So you can see I've masked off this area here, so I don't have any glue squeeze out, which will get onto the body here. So I just put lots of glue, all the way along here, like that, and then lots of clamps to hold it down to make sure this thing would sit nice and flat with the body, and again, I would not have any gaps along between the two different surfaces there. So there's what it looked like after it was glued together. Here you can see a little bit better shot of what the frets look like after I rounded them over. So you want to make sure you get these really nice and round, because your fingers are running up along this edge here all the time when you're playing, and you don't want them to to get cut or to have any sharp edges when you're moving up and down there. So really getting close now. Here I'm getting ready to glue on the bridge to the bottom here. You can see I've now drilled holes down here, which are where the strings are going to get tied to when they're getting installed on the ukulele. This slot here is where a piece of plastic goes. Plastic piece is the saddle. The wood piece here is the bridge. So this is where the saddle goes. You can see I've also drilled a few holes in here. What I did those for was I drilled some holes in the body as well as in the bridge here, below here, and then I used some toothpicks to be able to kind of keep these in alignment. And the idea there is because once you've got glue and everything on here, and you put clamps on to hold this in place, the glue kind of worked as a lubricant. So when you're applying clamps on here, there's a good possibility that this bridge is going to slide a little bit up or down, when you're applying the clamps. And it's really important to have the location of this bridge exactly where you want it, because it needs to be, of course, this needs to be perfectly perpendicular to the center line along here. But also the distance from here to this fret here, or to the the nut up at the top where the strings go, needs to be very specific. How far away it is, to make sure that the intonation is going to be good. So I use these toothpicks to help me get it aligned, so when I glued it in place, it was going to stay exactly where I wanted it. Something else I did before gluing it was I roughened up this bottom surface here. That's something I did because this glue joint is extremely important, because there's going to be a lot of tension. The strings are going to be pulling this constantly once the strings are in tension and the instrument's built. So this glue joint is really, really important, and my understanding and belief is that glue sticks a lot better to a rough surface than it does to a shiny, smooth surface. So I roughened up the back, and I also put masking tape around here and roughened up the body below here where it was going to get glued to. And there I am, gluing it in place. Now something else I did was I got my toothpicks and I cut them off, and I actually glued the toothpicks in there as well, and I figured that would kind of work like a dowel joint, just to get you a little bit of extra strength to help hold it in place there as well. So I left those toothpicks in there as a way that they weren't just for alignment. In the end, they actually used them for getting a little bit of extra strength. And I maxed off my body here to avoid getting this glue squeeze out on the outer glue on the glue surface there. And there I am with my clamps in place, holding the bridge where it needs to go. So now for the plastic pieces of the plastic pieces on the ukulele. There's pretty much two different plastic parts on the ukulele. There's the nut, which is the part that holds the strings up near where the tuners are, and there's the saddle, that little strip that goes and covers up where those holes were drilled, where the toothpicks went. So there's basically a plastic piece at the top and the bottom, which are what support the strings and hold them up. So I had a few different ideas of what I could use for plastic, but I'd seen that you could actually recycle your own plastic if you had a material called HDPE, which is a type of plastic. It's got the number 2 recycling logo on it. So this here is an example of an HDPE jug. I think this is for like holding windshield wiper fluid or something like that. But as long as it has the number 2 recycling symbol on it, you can use this stuff. So I just got, the thing that I used was something that I just found sitting in someone's recycling bin when I was riding my bike home from work. I just saw it in the recycling bin. I thought, oh, that would be perfect for what I need. So I brought it home with me, and I just cut it into little strips like this, and then I put it onto a piece of parchment paper on top of an old cookie sheet that I had. And then you put it in the oven and you heat it up, and I forget what the temperature you need to heat it to is. I don't know if I have it written down here, but certainly you can look up HDPE recycling. Oh, there it is. 175 degrees Celsius is what you need it to be. So you just put it on your parchment paper and you heat it up, and then you can take it out of the oven. And basically the way I got it all consolidated together like that is just by kind of folding the paper up and just pushing the sides together. This plastic doesn't become like a liquid. It doesn't become like molten. Again, like it doesn't become a full liquid. The consistency that it becomes is kind of like bubble gum, and then you can kind of just use it and manipulate it around and kind of group it together like that. And then what I did was I took it out of the oven and I put my parchment paper inside of this wooden mold that I made, or a form, I guess, and I just put it inside of there, and then I used clamps and pushed it down. And what happens as the plastic's cooling, it's shrinking quite a bit. So as the plastic cools, you need to constantly be tightening up your clamps on your mold to be taking up the extra space that's becoming available as the plastic shrinks, because you don't want any air bubbles to form inside of the plastic, because you want a consistent piece of plastic. So there's what my block of plastic looked like from that jug that I used. And it's recycled plastic, so it was pretty much free to be. The only cost was the cost of heating up the oven there. And from here I was able to cut out lots of pieces of plastic that I was able to use for my ukulele. Of course, this is way more than I needed. But anyways, if you're interested, HDPE plastic recycling is a really cool do-it-yourself thing that you can do. And it's anything that has the number 2 recycling logo on it. So here's the beginning of the nut, the piece that I used for the top of the ukulele, where the strings get positioned near where the tuners are, above where the fretboard goes. So I just shaped this and sanded it and got it, just using the same kind of woodworking tools, including my bandsaw. I just use that for cutting down the plastic to the right shape and size. And here I'm just starting to cut the slots for where the strings are going to go. And again, it doesn't look the nicest, but after you've kind of got it roughly shaped the way you want it, you just keep going over it with higher and higher grit sandpaper. And by the end I used 600 grit, and I got it really, really nice and smooth and shiny. And you really wouldn't know unless someone told you that my finished product was not something that was actually molded. It was something that was shaped. This picture was taken later in the project. I didn't take any good pictures of the saddle while I was working on it, but this is what the saddle looked like. Again, this saddle is simpler than the nut. It's basically just a strip of plastic which gets inserted into that little hole there. So now what I was getting ready to do next was to put my logo on here. Basically, I'm very close to the end of the project. I'm just doing the finishing touches, so I'm just getting ready to, again, paint my logo on here. So I just cut out the template just to make sure that it was going to fit and it wasn't going to get covered up by where the tuners went. So the way that I put that logo on there was I printed that same template onto a piece of sticky paper label, and then I used a razor blade to cut along the lines of where the logo needed to go. And I did my best to follow the lines with the razor blade. And then I just stuck that on there like that, and then I masked off the rest of everything, and I spray painted it with my green spray paint, and that's what got me my my logo on there. So here you can see I used a plastic milk bag to mask off this whole body here, as well as all around the headstock here, and that's because I didn't want to get any overspray on the rest of my ukulele. So thereafter, I think I did a few coats, 2 coats of green spray paint on there to get my logo, and then there it is. After I removed the mask, these lines they're a little bit wavy, they're not perfect, but I still like the way that it looks. It looks good enough for me. So now I'm getting ready to apply the finish. Now this was back in the middle of March. It was still pretty cold outside. It certainly wasn't warm enough for applying paint outside, so I decided to do this in my bathroom, above my bathtub, and I used a piece of string to suspend my ukulele up here. Now the type of finish that I used was a water-based, it's called Varathane Diamond interior water-based finish. And the reason I could do that inside of a bathtub is because it's water-based, so I was able to just clean it up afterwards with soap and water, whatever overspray there was on the inside of my bathtub. Although it really would have been better to do it somewhere outside, but I'm somewhat limited based on what I have available to me in my small apartment for doing this kind of thing. So there it is sitting there. So I just applied lots of coats. I think it was a total of 7 coats. Now you can see it's not really shiny, and that's because I didn't really want a glossy kind of a finish on my ukulele. I kind of wanted something that was a little bit more, I guess I used what's called the satin finish, which is a little bit more textured. It's kind of interesting actually when you put your hands on this ukulele. It kind of feels like leather in a way. It's kind of that kind of a texture, as opposed to being something that's completely shiny, like touching a piece of glass. So I really like the way that it feels. I think it was a good finish, but I think a lot of people prefer more of a glossy finish. So as I said, I applied about 7 coats of the stuff on here, and it dries really fast, so it didn't really take. It only took me about 2 or 3 days to get all that finish on there. And then in between coats, I always would sand it using some very high grit sandpaper. And then after sanding it, you want to get rid of all that dust, so I use a tack cloth to remove that dust. So there it is, sitting there, getting ready. Now it's pretty much finished and ready to get strings on it, and we're finally gonna hear what the thing finally sounds like. So here I am getting ready to install my tuning machines. Now I bought these tuning machines on eBay. They're not super expensive ones, but they work really, really well. I think, yeah, they're $7 Canadian on eBay, including shipping. So they're really not expensive tuners, and again, they work just fine. So they just get attached by each of them has a little screw hole, which you have to drill in the back there, and then on the front, you just tighten up a nut, which holds it in place, clamps it onto the neck. So there I am, just starting to insert my screws in there. And now, the moment of truth, I'm starting to install my strings on there, and it was really an exciting moment because, for the whole project, I spent, pretty much 4 months, the span of 4 months. I wasn't working on it every day, but I started the project in December and I didn't finish it until April 1st was the day that this photo was taken. For the whole project, I just kept thinking, is this all going to be worth it? Am I going to put strings on this thing and it's going to sound terrible, or is it going to sound really good and be worth it? So it was just this big anticipation waiting to get the strings on, and I put them on and I was so happy with how it turned out. So I again, if you want to hear what the ukulele sounds like, you can go and check out the videos that I've made with it so far. Here's just some more photos that I took of the ukulele outside, because I wanted to get, while it was brand new, I wanted to get some good photos of it. So I took it outside to a park and just got lots of photos of it. Let me just read some of my comments here. So this is the finished product. The project spanned from December 9th, 2014 until April 1st, 2015, almost 4 months. But along the way, I didn't work on it every week. There was, I took weeks off at a time, and also between little steps, I was always, really waiting and making sure I had a perfect plan of exactly what I wanted to do, so I wouldn't, do any damage to the ukulele. In total, materials, including the wood, including the strings, the tuning machines, everything else that I needed to buy, that was actually pretty much it. The total building cost was only $69.10, so really not that expensive for a good quality homemade ukulele. But on top of my building costs, I actually spent quite a bit on buying new tools for this project. I actually spent a total of $375.42 on tools, which may seem like quite a bit, considering I used them to build just a small little ukulele, but most of the tools that I bought are not instrument-specific building tools. Most of them are just general, workshop woodworking kind of tools that I'm going to use for many times throughout the years in the future, including my bandsaw and many other tools which I've used so many times since then, since I completed this project for lots of other different things. The only tool that I bought that wasn't instrument specific was the fret saw that I bought there, which is a tool that's specific for cutting fret slots. But as I mentioned earlier, hearing sound come out of this ukulele for the first time was just such a special experience. I remember just saying to myself, wow, it actually sounds like a ukulele, and it actually sounds like a really good ukulele. I was trying to replicate the sound of my Kala KAKS ukulele, and I actually prefer the sound that comes out of this one. It sounds even better, so I couldn't be more happy with the final result. Of course, having a ukulele which looks nice is great, but in the end of the day, it's the sound that is really what makes or breaks the instrument, so I'm really happy with it. I'm really happy with the type of finish that I used for this ukulele as well. I'm really glad that I didn't use any kind of a stain or anything like that on the wood, because it's really rare to have a ukulele which is entirely like a white colored wood from top to bottom. Particularly the fretboard is usually something which is will use something darker, like some kind of a black wood or something like that for there. But again, I really like the way that it looks. It's really unique, really special, and I really like the character of maple too. It's a good. I just like the way that it has all these little lines through it and everything. It looks really nice. On top of being really happy with the sound, I was really happy with this project as a whole. Like, I really enjoyed building it. It was a lot of fun. A lot of interesting challenges that I had to go and figure out how to clamp things, how to cut something, just figure out all the little bits and pieces. It really took a lot more than I ever thought it would. I thought I would be able to finish this within about a month, and it took almost 4 months in total from start to finish. So it was a real challenge, but I'm really glad that I took the plunge and decided to build it. It was a really great way of spending my winter. You know, it was actually a very, very cold winter we had in Toronto. So this was the perfect excuse to be able to stay inside and work on this rather than, you know, going outside and freezing.
Well, anyway, I hope you enjoyed joining me and learning about how I built this Maple Soprano ukulele. Please leave a comment below and let me know what you thought of this video. Check out cjhoyle.com, and thanks for watching.